If you're anything like me, you've also been wondering which type is the best in Pokemon. You've probably been reading articles and watching YouTube videos, staying up until late at night searching for the answer, but every time you're left feeling that these lists have too much subjectivity in them and too little science behind them, too much in my opinion. Well, you need look no further, for I have done it. Using ancient Sumerian techniques known as math and looking at numbers, I have made the first ever scientifically accurate list proving which Pokemon type is the best, and you may find the result to be shocking. But before I get into the list, here's how it works. All Pokemon share one thing. They have stats. Some Pokemon have higher stats than others, but all Pokemon have the same 6 base stats. These are HP, Attack, Defense, Special Attack, Special Defense, and Speed. And they can range from 1 to 255, but rarely go that high or that low. Let's look at Gengar here as an example. On the screen now, you'll see Gengar's base stats. We can see that Gengar has a base special attack stat of 130. This means that at level 100, depending on natures, IVs and EVs, he will have a special attack stat somewhere between 238 and 394. If you're wondering what IVs and EVs are, go ask Wolfglick. Now, if we add all of Gengar's base stats together, we get the number 500, and we call this Gengar's base stat total. It's pretty simple stuff. And for the most part, the higher a Pokemon's base stat total, the better the Pokemon is. That is why a Garchomp is better than a Bidoof. So it goes without saying that the best type in Pokemon is the one with the highest base stat total. So all we have to do then is find the one with the highest average base stats, right? What? No! Are you insane? Where did you get that idea? We're not gonna let some garbage sub 400 Pokemon hold the type back. This isn't amateur league where everyone gets to join in. This is the Olympics of Pokemon. Here we only care about the highest stats for each category, for each type. Allow me to demonstrate with an example. Let's say we're looking at the Ghost type first, and that there are only 4 Ghost type in all of Pokemon, namely these 4. We see here that Gengar has the highest HP stat of the 4 with 60, Spiritomb the highest attack with 92, Cofagrigus the highest defense with 145, Gengar the highest special attack with 130, Mimikyu and Cofagrigus the highest special defense with 105, and finally, Gengar is the fastest at 110. If we add all these numbers together, we end up at 642. Of course, there are a lot more ghosts to choose from besides these 4, but not every ghost will be eligible for this ranking. The rankings will be split into 2 videos. The one you're watching now is only for normal Pokemon. That means no Mega Pokemon, no Legendaries, no Mythics, and no Ultra Beast, and no Dynamax Pokemon. In short, if you can only catch it once and it cannot be bred, assume it's banned from this list. We are allowing the Paradox Pokemon though. Why are we allowing the Paradox Pokemon and not the Ultra Beast, you ask? Well, it gets a little bit finicky here. Ultra Beast and Paradox Pokemon are not classified as legendary by Game Freak. Ultra Beast used to be classified as a sub-legendary, but that has since been removed from the game's code. However, Ultra Beast just has that legendary vibe to them, I feel. In your first game, you could only catch them in a limited supply. In the second one, you had to go through a whole Ultra Wormhole, go to other dimensions to catch them. The Paradox Pokemon? Yeah, those guys are just sitting down in the basement of Paldea, and they're not these new, never-before-seen beings, but rather reimagined former Pokemon. The exception will be the Paradox Pokemon based off of legendary Pokemon, like Iron Boulder and Walking Wake. Those guys will have to wait until the next video. Because of these restrictions, Ash Greninja, the Greninja with Battle Bond you get from the Gen 7 demo or later in raids in Gen 9, is also banned. Sorry, I don't make the rules. We're also not considering Pokemon's abilities like Huge and Pure Power or Boost from Guts or similar abilities. However, abilities that allow a Pokemon to change form, like Cherrim for example, can get on the list in either of its forms. I would like to mention that Cherrim is not gonna make it to the list though. Okay, final rule. If a Pokemon is 2 types, like Gengar, who's both Ghost and Poison, it could count for either of those types if one of his stats is the highest in any category for either type. And there you have it. Those are all the rules. Now, before we begin, which type do you think ends up on top? Which one will be the weakest? And how will your favorite type do? Which is the best starter type? And with all that out of the way, I give you the official worst type in Pokemon. At 18th place, we find the Dark type. Known as the evil type in Japan, it's commonly the type for the evil teams in Pokemon games. Starting us off with a 111, we find Brute Bonnet, a Generation 9 Paradox Pokemon. It has the highest HP stat of all eligible Dark types. Next is Roaring Moon, another Paradox Pokemon, with its impressive 139 attack. Unfortunately, this is the closest the Dark type will come to ever breaking the 140 barrier in any stat, a barrier which all other types go past, some on a regular basis. The highest defense of any Dark type also belongs to a new Pokemon, namely King Gambit, with its 120 defense. While 120 might be higher for most Pokemon when it comes to defense, this is actually the lowest defense stat we're going to be seeing in all of these rankings. Then, perhaps unsurprisingly, Hydreigon's 3 heads has the highest special attack of all dark types with 125, while Umbreon's 130 special defense allows it a spot on these rankings, and I think that's sweet. I wonder if we'll see any more evolutions as this continues. Rounding it all off is Weavile with 125 base speed. When we add it all together, we get 750, which is, if nothing else, a very nice and round number. It is also lower than the base stat total of some Mega and Legendary Pokemon, but that's not really relevant for now. For those of you still upset about the banning of Ash Greninja though, now is the time to get truly upset. Its 145 attack, 153 special attack, and 132 speed would all have been the highest stats in their category. But don't blame me, blame Game Freak. The science fiction writer Isaac Asimov once wrote, "Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent." He wrote it in this book, somewhere in here, I don't know where. What he means is that smart, skilled, sensible people should be able to talk their issues through instead of, resorting to acts of violence. So I'm sure it would have pleased Asimov to learn that the fighting type has the second lowest stat total of all types. It is saved from a potential last place largely due to a newcomer, Iron Hands, whose 154 HP and 140 attack, shared with Conkeldurr, sees it snap up 2 positions on the ranking. Komolo's 125 defense is respectable for a type that favors offense, while Iron Valiant has the highest special attack with 120, which, unsurprisingly, is the lowest special attack we're going to see. Gallade and Scrafty's 115 is then the highest special defense stat for fighting, before finally Sneasler, the Hisuian evolution of Sneasel, wins the speed race with its 120 speed. With a stat total of 774, it sits a comfortable 24 points above the bottom. But when you're a fighter, you're not really interested in what's below you. It's all about what's above. Remember a few minutes ago when I asked what you thought was the worst starter type? Well, in the 16th we find it. And it's probably not that big a surprise to learn that it's the grass type that's the least favorite among Game Freak's favorite children. We all questioned the appearance of Go-Goat in Champion Gita's team in Scarlet and Violet, but its 123 base HP stat is actually the highest among all eligible grass type, as is Delmice's 131 attack and Ferrothorn's 131 defense. At best, these stats are serviceable, nearly good even. But with a 125 from Arboliva or any of the 2 Exeggutor's or Roserade as the highest special attack, and 120 from Eldegoss or Toadscruel in special defense, Grass quickly falls to become the lowest rated of the 3 starter types. But there has been a positive change for the Grass type. At the back end of their stat line sits Hisuian Electro, fresh out of Pokemon Legends Arceus, with a blinding 150 speed. Without it, it would have been Meowscarada's 123 speed that would have reigned supreme. A 123 would have had them falling below the fighting type. Instead, we end up at 780, 6 points above fighting, and 20 points below the next great threshold. In the world of Pokemon, fire is a formidable destructive force, a staple of any offensive strategy. In our official ranking, it manages to avoid the bottom 3, effectively gatekeeping what it means to be a respected type, so that's something at least. Although compared to what's coming later, it has a long way to go. Only one type has a lower highest HP stat than Fire's 110, which it gains from Emboar. But a fire Pokemon's job is to burn hot and fast, and no one burns brighter than a Zen mode Galarian Darmanitan. Its 160 attack stat is not just formidable, it's the highest attack stat we're going to be seeing for some time, and the best defensive stat is actually not too far behind. Many of you might remember running into Flannery's Torkoal in the Fire Gym in Laveridge Town, and they're struggling to overcome not only its firepower, but also its massive 140 base defense stat, and the hits are actually going to keep on coming, because Chandelure, a fan favorite from Generation 5, tortures everything in its path with a massive 145 special attack. This is not only the highest we've seen so far in the special attacking category, this is the highest base special attack stat of any eligible Pokemon in this ranking. But to burn brightly is to burn quickly, and a price must be paid. For fire types, that comes in the form of another 110, this time in special defense. Shared between Flareon, hey look at that, another one, and Iron Moth, it, like with Fire's HP stat, is the second lowest special defense stat of any type. Darmanitan then returns for final hurrah at the end, capping off Fire with a 135 speed. This gives us exactly 800. We are now well beyond the stats of even the mightiest legendary and mega that you can actually catch and use. 800, a beautiful round number, and surely we're now nearing the top of what a type can actually achieve. For the next part though, we're going to change things up a little bit. We're now entering the most competitive part of these rankings, where a measly 2 points of base stat total is going to separate 4 different types. And we're starting with a type that many consider to be one of the best type in the game. If you were to ask the average Pokemon fan which type, Poison or Dragon, they think is strongest, it's very likely they would choose the Dragon type. Most would assume Dragon to be one of, if not the strongest type of them all. Yet, here we are, and the numbers do not lie, so let the battle commence. Both Dragon and Poison get their highest HP stat from the most recent generation of Pokemon, but it is Poison type that starts out best. The new fan favorite Clodsir's 130 HP is the second highest HP stat we've seen so far. Dragon gets their highest HP from Excalibur, the ice dragon found on Paldea's highest peaks, but since it only stands at 115, Poison takes a commanding lead. But the one thing dragons are truly known for is their attacking prowess. While Sneasler's 130 attack stat is impressive for such a defensive type, Haxorus's 147 is nothing short of terrifying. And that thing isn't even a pseudo-legendary. And just like that, Dragon take a 2-point lead. But a 2-point lead's not gonna last you long when the next stat is defense. Toxapex has ever since its release given headaches to competitive players trying to take it down. Its 152 defense is the highest we've seen so far. Turtonator's 130 defense is strong, yes, but Poison regains the 15-point lead. At special attack, we must pause for a second to pay homage to someone who has, until very recently, been a mainstay on the list of most powerful Pokemon. For 8 generations, Gengar had the highest special attack among any Poison types. But with Generation 9 came the Paradox Pokemon, and among them we find Iron Moth. Its 140 special attack is 10 points higher than Gengar, as well as 5 points higher than Drampa, whose 135 is the highest of any dragon type. Poison lead goes all the way to 20. To no one's surprise, Toxapex is once again the strongest specially defensive Poison type, with its 142 base special defense. But part of the reason why dragon types are considered to be as strong as they are is because they have almost got a monopoly on the pseudo-legendaries. These 3-stage Pokemon have a stat total of 600 and can often go toe-to-toe with any legendary. We have already seen 2 of them in this ranking, with Baxcalibur and Hydreigon, and at special defense for Dragon, we're about to meet another one. Goodra, as well as Hisuian Goodra's 150 special defense, cuts the deficit to 12, but will that be enough? Or will the mighty Dragon type find himself in the bottom 5 of all types? Crobat. It exists partially to teach players that every Pokemon can have value. If you treat your Golbat right, it evolves into a very strong Pokemon, and a very fast one too. At 130, it is the fastest eligible Poison type in our ranking. But the final dragon is even faster. Its speed stat sits at 142. With 142, Dragapult, another pseudo-legendary, is the fastest dragon in our ranking, leveling out the deficit to a perfect 0. For the first time in our ranking, 2 types have the exact same base stat total number, 824. It is impossible to put one over the other without adding some arbitrary reason to, so I'm not going to do that. Dragon and Poison type both end up on 13th. Instead of a bottom 5, we have a bottom 4. But we have one more exciting duel to get to. Psychic and Electric are sort of opposites. Electric Pokemon are often very futuristic, metallic, or made out of man-made objects, while Psychic types are more magical, mystical creatures from space. So it's interesting to see that only 1 point separate them. No fake out this time, I promise, we're getting a winner. We start by welcoming back a Pokemon who's already been on the list twice. Iron Hands is the Electric type Pokemon with the highest HP, coming in at 154. An impressive number for sure, but not when you compare them to Psychic type's monstrous 190, which it gets from Wobbuffet. We will only see one Pokemon go past Psychic type when it comes to HP. You already know who it is, we'll get there eventually. The 36-point deficit is quickly cut short by, once again, Iron Hands. 140 attack sees him snap up the Electric type's attack spot as well. With this, it has made 4 appearances on the list. No single other Pokemon will make it onto the list more times. Gallade also makes a comeback on the list with an attack stat of 125. As is fitting for the Psychic type, this is the lowest attack stat we're going to be seeing in these rankings. And I think it's very neat to see the Psychic and the Fighting type mirror each other this way, the way the Fighting type is the worst at special attacking, and Psychic the worst at physical attacking. As for the defense, we have a dead race. Alolan Golem and one of the only 2 non-dragon pseudo-legendaries, Metagross, share a defense stat of 130, the highest for each of the respective types. Now, if I had asked you to pick Psychic type's best stat before we started, it's very likely that you would have gone with Special Attack. And Zenmo Darmanitan's 140 is only 5 points off being the highest for any special attacker. It is, however, beaten by the Electric type. Vikavolt, the Gen 7 Pokemon's 145 special attack, means the deficit is cut even further. By now you might be wondering, what is the lowest stat we'll see across all types? Well, we're gonna get very close to it here. In Generation 4, Rotom was introduced, and though it was difficult to obtain back then, it had the ability to change forms. By doing so, its special defense is increased to 107, making it simultaneously the highest special defense among any electric type, as well as the second lowest stat we'll be seeing in this ranking, and the lowest stat to make it onto the special defense category. Meanwhile, on the more fantastical side of things, we have a three-way tie between Generation 8's Orbeetle, Generation 3's Claydol, and all the way from the Kanto region, it's Mr. Mime. That's right, Mr. Mime made it onto the list of the best Pokemon of all time. All these three sit at a respectable 120 special defense, raising the difference to 29. And 29 is a lot. We've already met the fastest electric type. Prior to Generation 7, it had a base speed stat of 140, but the wise heads at Nintendo wanted to make the ball Pokemon relevant again, and by raising its speed by just 10 points, it could hit opponents with an extremely deadly Electro Ball, a move which power is calculated using the speed of the user and the target. But Psychic types have fast Pokemon of their own, right? We once again go all the way back to Gen 1 and Alakazam. But with a speed stat of 120, Alakazam is just too slow to help Psychic overtake Electric by one single point. It ends with Psychic in 12th place with 825, and Electric in 11th, just 1 point above at 826. So, we have our bottom 8. We started with Dark type, who, along with Fighting, have a lower stat total than some Mega Evolutions have. From there, we went on to 2 of the starter types. First Grass, before Fire broke the 800 limit. The next 4, Poison, Dragon, Psychic, and Electric, were all so close, a single new Pokemon for either of them can seriously alter these rankings. But that's for the future. As for now, we're getting to the part you've all been wanting to see. I give you the official ranking for the top 10 Pokemon types. I hope you're enjoying the video, and I hope you're enjoying these duels, because in a battle for 9th and 10th, we have another nail-biter. It's the ground type versus the type everyone loves to hate, the Fairy type. Let's do things a little bit different this time, and start with each type's lowest stat. For ground, it's a two-way tie. Ever since Generation 1, Dugtrio has been the fastest of all ground types with 120 base speed. 120 is also the highest base special defense stat for any ground type, which is shared by both Claydol and the newcomer Toedscool. The lowest stat for fairies is a 130 base attack stat from the Paradox Pokemon Iron Valiant, who makes his second appearance. If we were to combine the appearances of Iron Valiant and Gallade, this would be their 4th appearance in total. But we're not going to combine them, so who cares? 130 is also the highest HP stat for any ground type. It's shared between 2 newcomers, Clodsire and the powerhouse that is Ursaluna. Next, the Paradox Pokemon Fluttermane is the fastest eligible fairy type, coming in at 135. 135 is also the next stat for the ground type. Literally half of ground type's list is just made up of Ursaluna, this time in the Blood Moon version, coming in with a 135 special attack. And just 1 point above that, at 136, we find the fairy type's strongest special attacker, the Psychic Fairy type from Generation 8. Hatterene, or Hatterin, or however you pronounce it.
Hatterene.
The fairy type with the most HP comes from the very first generation, before the fairy type was even a thing, and is a rare case of Pokemon that has changed its typing over the years. Or, more specifically, it's gained an extra typing. Wigglytuff used to be just normal type, but with the addition of the fairy type, it makes it onto the list with its base 140 HP. So that's 4 Pokemon from each type, and fairy is currently in a very commanding lead with 541, while ground sits at 505, 36 points. But the best is yet to come from both types. First is the final appearance of Ursaluna, at least for now. Its 140 base attack stat, shared with Rhyperior, is the highest of all eligible ground types. But it is not enough to gain any ground on Fairy, because its second best stat is a 150 base defense stat. It gets it from Carving, you know, that not really pre-evolution thing to Diancie. I think they made an entire movie about it. Next, we do get the Fairy type's highest stat. With the introduction of Fairy in Generation 6 came the Flabébé line. Its final evolution, Florges, has a massive 154 special defense, the second highest we'll see in this ranking. This gets Fairy to an impressive 845. It currently sits a nice 200 points above the ground type. But 200 is exactly the final base stat for ground type. When Generation 2 was released, some hero working on the games decided to fix the ass-on backwards mistake of Pokemon that is Onyx. By giving it a Mad Max Pro makeover, we get Steelix, who sports a perfect 200 base defense stat. This brings both types to 845, another draw. This also means that there is no gatekeeper for the top 10. Instead, we have two types in 9th place, which is supposed to be the halfway line, so it sort of works out, I guess. That's these rankings for you. Nothing to be done but to trudge on towards the top. The Pokemon Company didn't seem to think of the flying type as its own typing. In the first 4 generations, no Pokemon was primarily a flying type, and not until the 5th generation did we get a Pokemon that was only flying type. Only recently have we seen a shift towards fixing this mistake, but that does not mean it's not a considerably strong type. From here on out, numbers from 150 and above will start to become a more frequent thing. As it happens, the first number for the flying type is a 150, specifically the 150 base HP stat of Driftblim. As for its attack stat, remember when I said we were ignoring abilities? Well, the same goes for bad abilities. That's why just this one time Archeops gets to shine. Its 140 base attack stat is no longer held back by its defeatist ability. Now let's talk about the defenses next, because I find this to be quite neat. In Gen 2, when the Steel type was introduced, Game Freak gave us Skarmory, and then they went and hid it so well that a lot of people thought it was from Gen 3, but that's not really relevant right now. What is important is that next to Skarmory, they also released Mantine. While Skarmory has a 140 defense stat, the highest of any flying type, Mantine has a 140 special defense, also the highest among any flying type. Finally, the 2 remaining stats. For special attack, we get 120 from Togekiss. For speed, we get 160 from Ninjask. As with electric type, the flying type thus also manages to have the highest stat of all in one category and the lowest in another. Only one of 4 types that manages to pull off this very odd feat. The flying type stat total then turns out to be 850. We're getting into the really high numbers now, but let's move on to another duel. It's time for what I call the Great Aegislash Showdown. I promise, it's not going to be another draw. From here on out, only winners. Now, some types have a very equal stat distribution. For example, the difference between the highest and the lowest stat for the Fairy type was only 24, while for the Ground type it's the opposite, where it was 80. We'll see the same thing again when Ghost and Steel square off. Let's start off at the bottom this time and work our way up. Steel starts us off with a 110 speed stat. Unsurprisingly, Steel has the lowest, highest speed stat of all types. It gets this 110 stat from the coolest dude on the list, Alolan Dugtrio. Though 10 points slower than regular Dugtrio, it still outspeeds all other Steel types. Ghost's lowest stat is a lot higher, a 140 base attack stat. It comes from Aegislash in its Blade form. Like with Darmanitan earlier, we do allow alternate forms since they are their own Pokemon with their own base stats. Okay, back to the Steel type. If you were to guess beforehand the 2 lowest stats the Steel type has, you probably would have gone with Speed first and second with HP. And you would be correct, of course. Coming in at 122, it's Copperajah, the Copper Derm Pokemon. Exactly what is a Copper Derm? I don't know. I tried googling it and all I got was Bulbapedia telling me that it's called Copper Skin, which I found to be gross and I do not like it. As for the Ghost type, they're coming in with another 140, this time for special defense, and it belongs to, once again, Aegislash, shield form naturally. Commanding lead for Ghost type so far, with a 280 against Steel's 232. But Steel type is picking up the pace by copying Ghost technique, for its next stat is also 140 in attack from Aegislash. Meanwhile, Ghost type has moved on to greater things. We welcome Dragapult back onto the list. Its 142 speed is faster than even speed demons like Gengar. Alright, back to the Steel type. Its next stat is, you guessed it, a 140 from Aegislash, this time in special attack. Ghost special attack comes in at 5 points higher. It's shared between both Chandelure and Cursola, and is, as last time we saw Chandelure on the list, the highest special attack stat of any type. So, 2 stats remain for each type. Ghost lead has gone up from 48 to 55, but we do know what's coming for the Steel type. Can Ghost extend the lead far enough? It starts the final 2 rounds with a 150 HP stat. You remember Driftblim, we saw him just earlier for the flying type, but Steel type's second highest stat is also a 150. Hisuian Gudra manages to keep Aegislash from taking up any more spots on the list, setting its total to 4, the highest of any alongside Iron Hands. But there's a huge but here, because the final stat for the Ghost type may not belong to Aegislash, but it's not exactly unrelated. Coming in at 150, It is actually Doublade, the second stage of Honedge and the pre-evolution to Aegislash, that has the highest defense of any eligible ghost type. This is the only non-fully evolved Pokemon to make it onto the list, and it also means that the Aegislash line has a total of 5 spots on the rankings. Those of you who are really good at addition already know what this means for the Steel type. Steelix's 200 base defense is 5 points too low to level the score. Instead, Steel ends at 862 and 7th place, while Ghost takes the 6th spot with 867. This means we're already done with the competitive trio of Fairy, Steel, and Dragon, as we get ready to take on the top 5 types in all of Pokemon. I used to think that the Ice type was the best type in Pokemon, because when I was a kid I had Pokemon Sapphire, and on Sapphire I had Kyogre, and on Kyogre I had Ice Beam, as you do. Every time I clicked Ice Beam, the opponent's Pokemon seemed to faint, so logically to me this meant the Ice type was the best. Then I got older, and everyone started saying the Ice type was actually really bad. All these YouTubers started talking trash about it, how it was terrible and the worst type there is. But then I made this list and I realized it's actually you guys who are wrong with your world championship knowledge and everything. Ice is the 5th best type in Pokemon. Furthermore, it's the first type to break the 900 barrier. Let's start at the top this time and work our way down. With 824 defense, both forms of Avalugg easily secure the top spot for Ice. It is then followed by a newcomer who's become something of a fan favorite, Gen 9's Cetitan, with its massive 170 HP. And the hits keep on coming. For the third highest stat is someone we've seen before, Galarian Senmotor Manitan. Its 160 base attack means that Ice is the first type to have 3 stats above 150. If it had been able to keep this up, it would have had a base stat total of well over 1,000, which is a ridiculous thing to even imagine. Unfortunately, the 3 next stats are not quite as high, although they're still impressive. Iron Bundle, another Paradox Pokemon, has a base speed stat of 136. Exactly why people in the future decided to remake Delibird into a speed demon is beyond me, but it earns the top spot for Ice in the speed category anyway. As for special defense, that stat belongs to Cryogonal, the crystallizing Pokemon from Generation 5. Though its physical defense is a bit lackluster, its 135 special defense is very impressive. Finally, remember a few minutes ago when I asked if you thought we'd see any more evolutions? Well, we're gonna see one final one here. For with a 130 special attack, no one will be blasting Ice Beams harder than Generation 4's Glaceon, the Gen 4 evolution. With that, the Ice type makes it all the way to 915, the first type to break the 900 barrier. But we have 4 more types to get through. The Water type and the Normal type. They're the 2 most common types in the games. Together, they make up 28.5% of the entire Pokédex, which is ridiculous. In this ranking, only 2 points separate them. Let's start with the Pokemon you know would be coming eventually. I mentioned earlier how a Pokemon stat can range from 1 to 255. Well, at HP for Normal, we find the only Pokemon to have the highest possible stat, Blissey. As if Chansey wasn't bad enough, the madman behind Gen 2 decided to give it an evolution with even more HP. So even though the Water type has a very impressive 170 HP, which it gets from Wailord, it's already 85 points behind. When it comes to the attack stat, the 2 Pokemon have 2 things in common. 1, their attack stat is 160. Second, they're both known for their abilities. In Normal's case, it's Slacking, who's known for his terrible ability, Truant, which only allows it to move every second turn. Meanwhile, for the Water type, it's Palafin, who changes into his hero form when he switches out, thanks to his from Zero to Hero. So the difference remains at 85 for now, but not for long, because Normal is another one of those types that have the highest stats in one category and the lowest in another. Blood Moon Ursaluna has 120 defense. That is the highest of any eligible Normal type. Before Blood Moon was released though, back when I started on this list, that number was even lower. In fact, it was all the way down to 105, coming from Ursaluna. Just as a comparison, Tangela has 115. I was actually shocked to see how bad this stat was for them. Water fares so much better in this category, even though it hasn't improved in 28 years. 60 points above Normal at 180 base defense, we find Cloyster. Amazingly, 180 was not enough for a spot on the Ice types list, but it's more than enough here. So with 3 more stats to go, the difference is cut to 25. And from here on out, it's all about the Water type. First, Normal comes in with a 135 special attack, which it gets from both Drampa, Porygon Z, and Blood Moon Ursaluna. Okay, I'm done mentioning Ursaluna for now. That was the 5th and final time an Ursaluna shows up on the list. The highest special attack of any Water type actually belongs to the weakest Pokemon in existence, Wishiwashi. When it changes into its school form, its special attack goes from 25 to 140. The difference is down to 20. Blissey then returns to normal in the special defense category with a base 135. But once again, the water type stat is higher. It's the return of Toxapex, whose 142 base special defense is water's highest. The difference sits at 13. So it comes down to whether or not the water type can go fast enough, a real quick attack versus Aquajet situation. Normal type makes one final push for the top 3 spot with a speed stat of 125. I knew Swellow was fast, but I didn't know it was that fast. Only Talonflame of the earlier out birds are faster, with Kilowattrel, cool name by the way, also having a 125 base speed stat. But the fastest water types are even faster. The stat is shared between 2 Pokemon, Barraskewda and Iron Bundle. They come in at 136, which is just 2 points short of matching Normal's base stat total. Water, by far the superior of the starter types, comes in 4th place at 928, 128 points above the fire type and 148 points above grass. Normal ends in 3rd with a stat total of 930. And so we're here at last. Only 2 types remain. 2 types that are often found near the very bottom of the list when it comes to the best types. The Bug type and the Rock type. One of these will be crowned as the best type in all Pokemon. Let's look a little closer at them first. In the mainline games, Bug type gyms are usually among the first you encounter in a game, because they're considered easy to beat. Generation 5's Berg is the latest gym leader you ever face in a game, and he's only the 3rd leader in Unova. There's also only ever been one Elite Four member who is a bug type specialist, namely Aaron from Generation 4. But there is one very famous bug trainer we have to consider. Usually when we say a trainer is a specific type, it is because their entire team consists of that one type. But what if half a trainer's team was bug type? Is it then not correct to call them a bug type trainer? Because in Generation 5's Black and White, just as you arrive to face the champion, mayhem ensues, stopping you in your tracks. But once you finish the post-game, you get another chance at challenging Alder, the champion. And he packs a punch, largely in the form of bug types. On his team we find 3 non-bug type Pokemon, namely Druddigon, Vanillux, and Buffalant. Buffalant even has Megahorn for some very redundant coverage, because the last 3 Pokemon Alder has are all bugs. There's the incredibly fast Excelgor, its much slower yet equally deadly counterpart Escavalier, and finally the only champion ace bug type, Volcarona. Although hampered by the omnipresence of stealth rocks in competitive play, if you let Volcarona set up a quiver dance on you, it is very likely that it's going to run away with the game. And then there's the rock type. Well, the story goes mostly the same. The very first gym leader in a Pokemon game you ever faced was a rock type trainer. Brock and his Onix is supposed to be the first fight to be truly challenging for the player. And then it happened again in both Generation 3 and 4 with Roxanne and Rourke. In Generation 6, you get to go all the way to the 2nd gym before finding a Rock-type gym leader, while the ultimate challenge as far as Rock-type gyms go is found in Generation 8, where the 6th gym is run by Gordy. In Generation 7, the format was changed up somewhat, and instead of traditional gym battles, you had Island Kahunas. One of these, Olivia, is a Rock-type user. She also shows up in the Elite Four as the only Rock-type trainer to do so. But once again, we do have a champion whose primary type is Rock. Okay, I know what Bulbapedia says. It says Steel-type specialist, but his name is Steven Stone. Steven Stone. Steven Stone, Generation 3's first champion, usually has a team of both Rock and Steel types. The one Pokemon he is most associated with is his Metagross, which leads many to think of him as a Steel-type trainer. But when he was first introduced, his team consisted of 3 Rock types and 3 Steel types, with Claydol being the odd one out. And hey, look at that, another Bug type on our Champions team. In his World Tournament team in Pokemon Black and White 2, Steven's team has a total of 4 Rock types versus only 3 Steel types. When he brings a full team of 6, not once does his Steel types outnumber his Rock types. Therefore, we can say with too much confidence that we have both a Bug type and a Rock type champion. These 2 trainers were far ahead of the curve, picking the 2 strongest types in the games. Okay, I have stalled for long enough. The video is long enough as it is. I present to you now the statistical comparison of the 2 objectively strongest types in Pokemon. This time, we will start with the highest stat, then work our way down, until we find out which type is the strongest. And we're starting with one of the major reasons it ended up like this. Ah, yes, there it is. Take a good look at it, for this is peak Pokemon design. For with one single Pokemon, we have already crossed out 4 of the stats of our top 2 types. Shuckle is something of an oddity. 4 of its stats are absolute garbage, but in both of its defenses, Shuckle has the highest base stat of any eligible Pokemon, 230. It is the only Pokemon capable of having over 600 defense or special defense, though not at the same time. Again, ask Wolfglick if you have any more questions about that. Just like that, we're off to a flying start, and we're not going to slow down. For the next stat we're looking at is the number 165. Now, some Pokemon do one thing very well and not much else. That is the case for Rampardos, the Generation 4 fossil Pokemon. Its 165 attack stat is not just the highest of any rock type, it is the highest attack stat of any Pokemon in our ranking. So what's next for the bug type? Well, we've actually seen it already. At 160, Ninjask is the fastest Pokemon in our entire rankings. And then they gave it speed boost for some reason. I don't get it either. Swords Dance as well, and Baton Pass just for extra fun. Great design. For those keeping a score at home, Rock is up by 5 points. But not for long, because up next is the bug type special attack. And with a 145 from Vikavolt, we get to see something truly special. For the 4th time, the bug type has a stat that's the highest in its category. No other type manages this feat. Bug is now up by 140. And the next stat also belongs to the bug type. With a base attack of 135, Slitherwing, Escavalier, Cleavor all make it onto the list as Bug continues to pull ahead of Rock. With 5 stats down versus Rock's 3, Bug is up by 275 points. It waits for Rock at the 900 base stat total. Hey, pop quiz, which champion is the easiest to beat? And follow-up question, which champion has the most Pokemon on this ranking? That's right, it's Scarlet and Violet's very own champion Gita. Does that mean these rankings are wrong? No, it means you played the game wrong. So far, we've already seen 3 of the Pokemon she uses on her team, Kingambit, Gogoat, and Avalugg. But her ace also makes it onto the list. With 130 special attack, Glimmora is the rock type with the highest base special attack we're going to see in our rankings. Okay, I know that Leon technically also has 4 Pokemon because you can pick from his different teams, but I thought it was funnier this way. 130 also happens to be the speed stat for the fastest rock-type Pokemon. Here, at the very end of our rankings, we still find Pokemon from the first generation. In this case, it's Aerodactyl, the greatest of all fossil Pokemon. With that, we add 260 to Rock. The deficit is cut to 15. Time for the very last duel. A perfect 1000. Centiskorch's 100 base HP stat is just enough to get Bug past the 1000 line, the first type ever to reach these heights. But Rock type is not done yet. And there you have it. With a 123 base HP stat, Aurora brings Rock all the way to the top of the list with a stat total of 1008. And with that, we have our full ranking. The numbers do not lie, and I thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. Join me next time when we remake the list, allowing all Pokemon except one to participate. Until then, so long.